Hello and welcome. My name is Jeffrey Kennedy and welcome back to another episode of Elliott Wave Junctures. Today we're going to be talking about Fibonacci. In fact, you can't really talk about market analysis or technical analysis without having at least one conversation on Fibonacci or Fibonacci ratios, multiples. And in fact, when it comes to the wave principle, Fibonacci relationships, Fibonacci mathematics is actually a very integral part of what we do with respect to wave analysis. In fact, when R.N. Elliott first developed the wave principle, or actually discovered the wave principle back in the 1930s, he actually wrote a book called Nature's Law, which actually stated in that book, R.N. Elliott stated that the Fibonacci ratio or Fibonacci mathematics was the actual underpinning or the basis, mathematical basis of the wave principle. And I just want to show you some examples of its use with respect to not necessarily retracements, because I talk about retracements in Fibonacci quite often in futures junctures, and I will at some point in Elliott wave junctures, but I really want to talk about with respect to motive waves. Okay, so what we actually have here, this is an equity, this is an individual stock, this is a PulteGroup, ticker symbol is PHM, and what I want to do is kind of like work small and then kind of step back. Now first what we're going to look at, and again we're basically talking Fibonacci with respect to impulse waves. Okay, here we go, here's the same issue, same labeling, and what I'm looking at right here is, here's the actual labeling I'm working with. Now what we have here is a small 1, pull back in 2, and then we see our wave 3. Well, wave 3, as you can see at 808, at 808, wave 3 is a 2.618 multiple of wave 1. That is a common Fibonacci multiple for third waves, especially in wave 3, certainly within wave 3 of 3, which is what the situation is. So that's a very common relationship we tend to see. Actually, with respect to wave 3, we tend to like to see, say, 1.618. I like 2.0. Then beyond that, it's 2.618. And beyond that, we have 4.236. So in this instance here, prices rallied just to a little bit above the 808 mark, then pulled back, actually formed a small triangle here, and then continued higher up to that point. Well, at 903, we pushed up a little bit above it and then reversed, but at 903, that's where wave 5 actually equals a 618 multiple of waves 1 through 3. So what I'm essentially doing here is taking the distance traveled in waves 1 through 3, which is roughly right about here, multiplying that length, that distance, by 0.618, and that gives me an upside target for wave 5. Okay, so we're just simply working this 5-wave structure. Okay, now let's step back a little bit more. Okay, well, now we're going to look at the red labels. So I'm essentially going from this point, waves 1 and 2. Well, wave 3 equals a 2.618 multiple of wave 1 at 949. Well, we got within just a few pennies of that actual target. Here's our 949 mark, and then we pull back in wave 4 and then push higher in wave 5. Well, as you know, with respect to wave equality, or the guideline of wave equality, when wave 3 extends, as it does clearly in this instance here, we tend to like to see wave 5 and 1 tend toward equality. Well, right here, wave 5 equals wave 1 at 960. Well, there's 960. Look what happens. We push up and then we get into this nice sizable pullback. Okay, let's step back one more time here. As I previously said, some of the most common Fibonacci relationships we like to see within wave 3, because as you know, with respect to the equity market, wave 3 is where prices tend to travel the farthest in the shortest amount of time, or that's where you tend to see your extended wave. That wave 3 is the extended wave most often in equities. Here we have our wave 1 right here, our wave 2 pullback, and then we see our big move to the upside. There's our wave 3. Well, at 953, wave 3 equals a 1.618 multiple of wave 1. Again, these are the relationships R.N. Elliott essentially identified back in the late 1930s. Well, here's a stock over the last couple of months, essentially since the fourth quarter of 2011, and you can see that these relationships that he identified way back then are still very much applicable today. Now, I will say one thing from a trading perspective, not necessarily an analytical perspective, because this is neat and this is cool and this is exciting, and this is why I'm passionate about what I do. But from a trading perspective, one thing I do recommend is that you create these clusters. Notice this area right here. This was 953, and then we had 960. I'd like to see a lot of these levels basically stack up on top of one another and also be very, very close together. Notice the distance here, very, very close together. What I find is whenever you have a tightly bound cluster of Fibonacci support levels or Fibonacci resistance levels, the odds of a reaction and actual price is much higher. So this is why whenever I'm doing my analysis, I'll do multiple Fibonacci relationships, internal, sometimes working with small structures, sometimes working with larger structures, because essentially what I want to do is find that area on a price chart where I see a lot of lines coming together very, very tightly, because that's the area that's most likely going to be the one that's going to either spark a reversal in price, either to the upside or to the downside. That about does it for today. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week.